Do you trust yourself enough to know that even when you get knocked down, you're going to find a way to get back up?
Les, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Han.
Your entire journey was getting back to who you were when you were younger.
I had to go through a journey of realizing it's okay to want more and that I can have more, even if the people immediately around me don't understand. Online, people talk about pivots and rebranding as this big celebratory thing. That pivot that we have often comes with a cost.
It takes money to make more money,
Right.
and you have to sit in the uncomfortable of, do I trust myself to execute? That self-doubt, I think, is normal, but you have to be able to be resilient through it.
When you're taking these risks, or you're doing these things, or you're making these changes, it's not because you know it's magically going to work out. It's because you trust yourself enough to know you're going to make it work either way.
People do not talk about enough, like how long it actually takes to build a business, be successful, be profitable. That's not something that happens in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year usually. That's years compounded.
The gap between where we as everyday people are and these really successful people that we look up to is so much smaller than we think. And I think that that's empowering. Hey, how do I bridge that gap for myself? She's not that far ahead of me. It does take more than believing in yourself, but believing in yourself gets you at least halfway there.
You're listening to How I See It, hosted by Han. You guessed it, that's me. I am here to motivate and inspire you with guests from all different industries and backgrounds. So get ready for personal stories of success, of growth, full of highs and lows, and of course, unapologetic realness. This is How I See It. You guys, I am so excited to introduce Alfred to the podcast. She is the host behind the podcast She's So Lucky, a chart-topping weekly podcast dedicated to women who create their own luck against all odds, which I'm going to make her get into today. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Han.
I'm so excited to just meet you in person. You see people online for so long and you like watch them and you're like hearing them, and then you kind of like meet people who are next to them. And I was like, it's time that I reach out to her and ask her if she wants to come on. So I'm so happy you're here. I know how hard it is to podcast, like we were talking about before.
Yes.
Hustle sees hustle.
Yes.
It's very difficult to continue to have conversations and curate a community and all the things.
It is so difficult. People think that you're just sitting down and talking, and they think, oh, you just yap. That's easy. It's not, especially once you do it a couple hundred times. At this point, I'm coming up on like 400 episodes soon, and it's hard to sit down and do that 400 times.
Congratulations. That's such a big deal.
Thank
400
you.
episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on season 4 now, and we're only on 141 or
That's
2
a lot.
But
Yeah.
like that's only been 3 years, so I can't even imagine how long has it been for you to be at 400?
7.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's probably interesting to go back. I don't know if you do. I get kind of cringed out when I like go back to the beginning, but to see like the evolution of kind of like the ups and downs of like who you were, who you've become, who you've grown into.
I can't go back and listen because I can't listen to myself
No.
back then, but I will go back and I'll look at photographs, or I'll look at descriptions, or I was in a big digital decluttering phase last year.
Love.
So I was going through all my old Google Drives, and I was finding these spreadsheets of, when I was planning the show in the beginning, or when I was first starting to make money, and all the different sources of that. And it made me feel super nostalgic for how far it's come.
I'll go back and like hear a clip of myself or something saying like an absolute or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so not true. And I have to almost meet myself with compassion instead of shame, because I'm like, fuck, like I sound so stupid that I like said that, but that's just where I was at that time. Do you feel the same way about like, kind of like seeing like your journey as like a human and person and business owner evolve in those ways?
Oh, 1000%. I mean, when I first started the show, I was 29. I was still living in Seattle, which is my hometown. I'd never really been anywhere. I mean, I'd been other places, but I'd never lived other places. I'd never really taken a risk before.
Yeah.
I was just such a baby grown up, and I realized that I've grown more in the past 7 years than I did probably in the first like 29 years of my life. And I look back and I'm like, man, I was so young. I didn't know anything.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, something really profound that you said in our intro call that I took note of was like, your entire journey was getting back to who you were when you were younger.
Yes.
And I think that like really hits. I think it applies to, our own healing. I think it applies in business. I think it applies in like all aspects of finding fulfillment. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah. So when I was younger, As a kid, I really wanted to be a journalist, and I
So
picked
cool.
up on that pretty early, but I also think it's because of the time where I grew up, there was a lot of exposure to that. It was like
Yeah.
every show, every movie, the woman was a fashion editor and had a magazine, and it
The
was
OG
something really
influencer.
cool. They were the OG influencers. I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers as a kid,
Aw,
and I feel like when a kid spends a lot of time growing up around old women, there are signs. So I also spent a lot of time watching, like, daytime TV and
love.
talk shows. So I was very drawn to media and storytelling at a very young age. I loved magazines and print, and I would create my own magazines and I would tell my own stories. And that was very much what I wanted to do my
Yeah.
whole childhood. And I ended up getting away from that when I was in college. I originally intended on going to school for communications and going down that whole path. And when I was in college, that was when the last big recession hit, and my family was hit really hard.
Mm.
I was in school, I'd taken out all these loans. And when I looked ahead at the journalism career path, I was like, okay, my best bet would be getting a job probably in, like, a middle of nowhere TV station making maybe $30,000 a year. Like, I can't afford to do that. I
Yeah.
gotta graduate and immediately make some money and start making something shake, and so I ended up going the corporate route because I just felt like that's what was gonna be a little bit easier and more lucrative, and
Yeah.
it set me on this long, kind of windy path, and I feel like now I'm finally getting back to what it was I truly wanted to do, which was be in media and tell stories.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people probably have like a similar story where they had like this deep knowing at like a young age of like where they were supposed to be, what they were aligned with, but for some reason they felt like they couldn't go for it. Do you think there was anything else besides money that was like holding you back? Or do you think you were just like, at the time, this is what I have to do to make it, and then I'll revisit that passion later?
Money was a big part of it, and I also think, I mean, the environment that I was in, Seattle's not necessarily a media hub. It's very
Yeah.
techy, so you could get a job at, like, an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Boeing, and that's just what people do there, and so I feel like because I was in that environment where it seemed like the best thing you could do would was to get a job at one of these local corporate giants, stay there for 30 years, and have that be your life, and I was
Yeah.
constantly told, "That's the best that you can do. Do that, you'll be set, whatever." So because I was able to do that in my early 20s, that was kind of where my career started. I thought, like, "Okay, is this all I'm capable of?" Because that's what everyone around me is saying. Everyone's acting like this is such a big deal, that
Yeah.
this is where I'm at. It feels off to me and I hate it, but I had to go through a journey of realizing it's okay to want more and that I can have more, even if the people immediately around me don't understand, or even if I don't see it immediately around me.
Yeah, I think, like, whether you, like me, like, grew up in kind of, like, an emotionally chaotic place where, like, you are denied, like, your reality and trust, like, that starts to, like, disintegrate your self-trust and your inner knowing, and or if you just are going through the motions of becoming an adult, having to, like, fit a mold that you feel you're supposed to fit, also money comes into play, and you kinda hear, like, all this noise around where you're like, "Okay, well, maybe that's a pipe dream, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do."
Exactly. Yeah, and realizing, okay, if I don't really have a safety net, can I take a risk like that knowing that if
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, like, I'm fucked.
Yeah. No, totally.
There's not really a backup plan,
Yeah.
or there's not any, I kind of only have myself to make this work. I now know in hindsight, yes, I can do it and I could have gone for those things, but
Yeah.
at the time I just didn't know.
So how long were you in corporate, and, like, what was the moment where you were like, "Enough is enough, I can't do this anymore?"
I mean, I knew like day 1 that I wasn't meant to be there.
That
I
must have
s
impacted your mental health.
Oh,
I
my
feel like
mental health was
I would've been,
horrible.
like, suicidal low key at a desk.
I was low key, like, if anybody ever comes out with stories where it's like, "Les was a mean girl," it was probably from that time in my life, like, the first 5 years after college, I was miserable. I had, like, a terrible commute. I had the most grayish cubicle, sitting, hearing about, like, airplanes all day. I don't care about none of that. Finance, like, oh yeah, I was a horrible version of myself. I was very cranky. I was not very nice. I was very
Yeah.
grouchy. I didn't wanna be there. Wellness kind of saved me because that was when I fell into my wellness journey, and that helped a bit. That was the only thing that was kinda keeping my mental health together, was, like, the little bit of endorphins that I was getting from exercise. I started kind of taking bets on myself maybe about 5 years into corporate. That was when I started creating content. I started teaching fitness.
Around, like, wellness stuff and the
Yes,
practices. Okay.
exactly. So that was what helped me start to, like, step out of that position that I was in a little bit. I didn't fully leave corporate till many years later, but I started kind of dabbling in things that interested me about
Yeah.
5 years in.
When was it like enough is enough?
I tried to leave corporate a couple of times and ended up going back because I ran out of money. So the first time was
I
at
love
that
that.
5 year, yeah, it was, like, very real. First time was at that 5-year mark. I'd been at my original company for 5 years, and I was like, "I gotta go. They're not gonna keep me." I ended up having a big quarter life crisis, quit my corporate job, ended up working full time at Lululemon in the store, which
Wow.
was actually a really great experience. It was a terrible financial
Yeah.
decision, but it was great for my mental health. And also at the time, Lululemon treated their employees great. Like, I learned so much about leadership and business and running a store,
Yeah.
and it was a really great experience
Well,
that
and
I
it gave you,
was.
like, space to, like, figure out what the fuck you were gonna do.
Yeah, exactly, and it was nice to have a job that didn't follow me home. I could go to the store and help customers and fold pants, and then when you're off work, you're just off work, and
Yeah.
I was getting really into content, I was teaching workout classes, and I spent about a year doing that, and it was a really good year of self-discovery, but then after that, I was like, "Okay, I am at the end of the day a girl who's about her money, and I was like, "I gotta make a living again," and so I went back to corporate, but I did after that start getting corporate jobs that were just a little bit more interesting. So
Yeah.
I made the shift to marketing. I started doing like social media management, community relations, more kind of PR related work.
Yeah.
And I still knew that that wasn't going to be my thing, but it was a lot more tolerable.
Yeah, and at that time, had the podcast started yet?
No, I didn't have the
Okay.
podcast yet. I was still blogging and I was creating social media content,
So
but I wasn't
cool. So I
podcasting
can
yet.
imagine you were feeling, like, a little more fulfilled even though you were going through this, like, quarter life crisis. I think it probably was because you didn't feel, like, authentically aligned with what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, it was not necessarily work that I loved, but it wasn't so soul-sucking.
Yeah.
My quality of life was a bit better.
There's this, like, misconception now with, like, content culture and TikTok or whatever that you can just, like, quit your day job and, like, be a content creator and, like, live this, like, amazing lifestyle that you're living when you're in corporate, and I do think there is a balance, like, people can have a realistic job that supports a life that makes sense. Like, we're recording in New York right now. I live in San Diego. You used to live in LA. Like, you have to make a good amount of money to be able to, like, live in a happy state, like,
Yes.
there. Like,
Yeah.
you do. It's just, like, realistic. But I do think that if you're working corporate while also pursuing something that, like, lights you up and, like, makes you happy, like, I don't think you need to give it up to, like, do what you love or follow your passion or pursuit or purpose.
No, not necessarily. I think you can create a lot of stability with that.
Yeah.
I also think that you learn so much about business. I think when people think of content creators, they only think of the content. And that's actually a
Yeah.
very small part of it. You're running a business on the back end. And I learned how to run a business. Even though I was a business major in school, I've learned so much more about business actually working in corporate, managing a team, talking to HR, managing a budget, doing performance reviews. Like, I'm able to run my business now because I spent 13 years in corporate learning how
Yeah.
to do that on a company's dime.
Yeah, I feel like that part of it, I think I've always been like an entrepreneur at heart. That part of it was always the part that I took really serious as a creator. And the part that I felt a lot of creators were missing is that like feeling of knowing their worth and then also being able to negotiate rates and then look at contracts and be able to be like, no, that doesn't make sense. Instead of just being like, okay, well, all I know and all I've done is creating content. So I'm not sure how to maneuver the part of the job that's actually going to like elevate it to be a real business. Do you think there was a moment kind of in this like quarter life crisis, self-discovery era where you realized that you had kinda, like, left your younger self behind?
You know what's funny? I didn't actually realize that till very recently.
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
realize that at the time. It's really only been the past couple of months where I've been like, oh, actually, this is what I've been getting at. It's
Mm,
also because I personally, and this might be a little bit controversial, am kind of over influencer culture in general, and I'm
yeah.
wanting to remove myself from it because I see what I want to do as being separate than that. I'm grateful for my experiences being an influencer creating content. It's gotten me to where I am today. But I do see the differences between what the general, public wants to see from content creators versus what I want to do. But it's been in realizing those differences that I'm seeing, oh, actually, this is what my younger self wanted all along.
Yeah, I mean, I always say I'm, like, the anti-influencer. Like, I feel like I'm always the one that's like, "What's going on?" Or, like, wanting to, like, optimize and trailblaze and kind of, like, move, but I think that's kind of how influencing started,
It
is, like,
did.
it started as something where someone saw a gap and needed to fill it. And I think and hope that like the industry will just continue to evolve, and there will be people like us and other women that we've probably both interviewed who are like using content creation as a stepping stone to building a business, podcast, getting involved with all of these other missions that are close to their heart.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of it really stemmed from self-expression, particularly for women who wanted to build community around fashion or fitness or things that they were interested in. They wanted an outlet and a space to talk about it. And it happened to become a multi-billion-dollar industry in like a decade.
Yeah. I listened to one of your podcast episodes recently, and you said that you recently went back to therapy. And you hadn't gone in like a while. You had went, and like similarly to me, I feel like I was in therapy for a long time though, and I was like really doing the work, working through my trauma, and I was like, yay, like I did it. I solved all my problems. I can go back into the world. And it was a complete 180 in my life. It really was. But I had to go back and kind of look at, now that I have that awareness, like what am I going to do now? And it sounds like you similarly had that journey. What do you think was like kind of the catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, it was a couple of things. I went back to therapy for real back in 2024. And there were a few things that led to that. One, I'd been in therapy a few times in my life previously, but I'd only been if like something was on fire. If I was experiencing debilitating anxiety, or I was going through a breakup, or somebody died, then I would go to therapy for a few months and talk about it, and then I would kind of move on. And back in 2024, that was my first time just going to therapy when things weren't on fire. It was just maintenance. And also at the time, I had just moved to New York. I'd just gone full time with my business. And so I was just going through a lot of transition. I also realized that previously I'd only ever done talk therapy. And for me, I felt like I just needed something a little bit different, because I can explain what happened when I was 7 and talk about my feelings 10 ways to Sunday. But for me, I don't really process things through talking about them because I'm already good at talking. I was a language arts kid. I'm a writer. I'm a communicator.
Yeah.
I can talk about it all day, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually dealing with it.
I'm intellectualizer, final boss.
Yeah.
Like I do not, that's what I'm working on right now too. Like processing, like what the fuck does it mean to feel? I have no idea.
Right. And so I ended up going to therapy with a therapist who was specializing in somatic practices and EMDR, really helping me understand for the experiences I had, like where were they showing up in my body and how could I better kind of metabolize them. I realized I just have a tendency to blame myself for everything.
Ugh, yeah.
Everything. And I think part of that can be good in the sense of having a sense of self-awareness and not having like a victim mentality, understanding the role that we all play and what happens is great. It was to the point where I was blaming myself for the behaviors of others and for the things that other people were choosing to do with their free will. And that's where I definitely had some things to work through.
We're very similar in this way. I feel like there has to be something to be said about like entrepreneurial women who are podcasting, who like are into like creating content, writing, the arts, and also business, because I do think this is a common theme, and I think it makes us very successful in business.
Yeah.
Like very successful, because if you're constantly blaming yourself and taking accountability,
and fixing things,
you're putting out fires, you're executing at a high level. It makes you really good in business. It's really hard in your personal life. I can't sit in almost like the unknown or in the I can't do anything to fix this. So I feel like taking blame or taking rejection or putting everything on me and my responsibility to fix everybody else became like my protocol.
And that becomes so much to carry.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes so much to carry that you have to learn what to put down, what's not yours to carry anymore.
Yeah. Do you think that was something that you just grew up with? Are you the oldest in your family?
Mm-hmm. A lot of the dynamics that I had with adults in my life was me feeling very emotionally responsible for the adults in my life. And it was not by any means like where I was parentified or adultified, but I definitely was like the confidant for adults in my life when I probably shouldn't have been.
Yeah, well, and I think like mental health and healing and really looking at yourself is like a new wave thing.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends who were fortunate enough to grow up in like houses where parents were very stable and kind and loving still have trauma around this stuff because like our parents didn't know like to do the work and not like trauma dump on their kids. Or I think there's boundaries now that people are learning like, wow, we can reduce trauma, reduce mental health issues if we all kind of like do the work and take responsibility. At the end of the day, I think that's up to people if they want to do that. But I just think we didn't have the language for it back then.
No, definitely not.
I'm curious to know if it went around the rebrand of your podcast, kind of all of these realizations, because I know that your podcast was called The Balanced Black Girl, right?
Yeah.
And then you moved to She's So Lucky.
The rebrand was exactly 1 year ago, like this week, which
Love.
is wild. I actually, the day almost came and went and I forgot until my phone memories popped it back up. And I was like, oh, it's been a year since this big thing happened. But there's also a part where it almost feels like that's always what it's been. I think the label of balanced, which was something I'd carried for a very long time, was something that I just didn't want to carry anymore, because every time I'd sit down for one of these interviews, people would tell us, well, how do we be more balanced? So what do you do to stay balanced? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not balanced. Like, I don't know. And so I really wanted to not have that associated with me anymore, because it felt like I had to be this all-knowing guru. Like I couldn't be a person who was still learning and figuring it out. With the transition to She's So Lucky, it has allowed me to be a bit of a student again, which is what I really like to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, especially, when we're first starting out or we haven't embarked yet on all of the levels of like self-exploration and looking inward, like we keep ourselves in boxes. And I think we're told, especially as women, a lot to like stay in boxes.
Yeah.
I've always from a young age been like a dreamer. I've always wanted to do so many different things. And I feel like my entire life people were telling me like, well, you can't do all of it. You can't do all of those things. And
Why
so I
not?
think we like assign ourselves these weird like labels and boxes. We're like, okay, well, if I want to be a podcaster, I have to stay in this like wellness sector because like that's where I've created content. And I've just realized like authenticity overpowers every single time. And if you're not showing up as the version of yourself that makes you the happiest, or you're not exploring all parts, like you're not going to really get to the next level.
No, at all. And also it was like at that point, I was almost 300 episodes in. Like, how many times can I tell y'all to journal? You're either you're doing it by now or you're not. Like, I'm ready to talk about some different things. And I actually shared a post on Instagram yesterday where I'd shared some of the reflections I'd learned 1 year after rebranding. And one of the members of my community left the sweetest comment. She was like, girl, you could rebrand again today and I'd still follow whatever you do. And I was like, that's so nice.
Yeah, well, it's true because like rebranding is just like us moving through the ups and downs of the human experience.
Yeah.
And you did this amazing post where you addressed like pivots and like how to move through the ups and downs, and you broke it into like 4 different categories.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know
that's
if
the
you
same post.
Okay, I don't know if you remember them off the top of your head, but can you like kind of break down like the process of that and like how you explain it? I'm assuming it's off of like your own kind of healing with this identity shift that you had.
Yeah, I'd explained that, online people talk about pivots and rebranding as this big celebratory thing, and it can be.
Yeah.
If someone has a fresh start, if they move to a new city, they rebrand, they launch a business, whatever. Those things are great. But the way that they're often described is like, I rebranded this thing and everything is awesome.
Let's throw a party.
Yeah, I'm a new person. But what I hadn't seen people talk about as much, and what I've experienced over the past year, is that pivot that we have often comes with a cost. And so I called it the pivot tax, and it broke down into like 4 different costs. One of which was like the identity cost, which is like grieving that older version of yourself, even when you're stepping into this newer, improved, more healed, better, abundant version of yourself, you're still going to grieve that person who you once were.
People don't talk about the grieving process enough.
Yeah.
Of like having a realization, whether it's in like your mental health journey or in your business or whatever, and having to realize and kind of make yourself uncomfortable to jump to the next level. You have to grieve that old part of yourself or like the old identity. You almost have to like kill your ego, and it's very painful and like emotional, I think.
It is. It's very difficult. So it's like there's that personal grief. There's like kind of the social cost. So it's anytime, especially if you're somebody who is a leader, who is a trendsetter, who is ahead of the curve, anytime that you step out and do something new, there are going to be people who don't get it. Maybe those are people that are close to you. Maybe those are people who are in your audience or whatever. There's always going to be that person who is like, well, why are you doing that? Well, I liked how you were before. Well, I don't understand. It always takes people a while to come around to it. And eventually they usually do. Or if they don't, I mean, that's not really your problem because you're growing and evolving. But there is that. And that is difficult to hear.
Yeah.
Even if you're not someone who lives or dies by others' opinions, that's still difficult to hear.
anyone that's been successful has had to be like a trailblazer, which is like not caring or giving a shit about like what other people have to say, like respectfully. Like I think it's important to listen to people's opinions. It kind of, I think, helps me align with like my trust in myself.
Yeah.
Like when I hear someone's opinion, I'm like, okay, I for sure don't agree with that. You know what I mean? Like I can like kind of gauge my own like gut, but I do think it's hard and it takes like bravery and courage, but I think that's what sets people apart.
It does. Yeah. And there's a lot that comes with kind of being misunderstood.
Yeah.
I still think it's worthwhile, but
Yeah.
I don't think we should act like it never bothers us or it's not hard to hear.
Well, and a lot of people are just projecting like what they could never do.
Exactly.
So like I think I've learned that over time too. And I don't think there's like a switch that happens where it's like if you do this, it won't hurt as much when people around you don't like support you. I think it's just over time you build evidence of like, I know myself well. People are always going to say something. They care about me. I'm going to assume the best that like whether it's a follower or a community person, they're just sharing because they want to share. And it's just a projection of like their own comfort level.
Right. And oftentimes where I think a lot of that comes from is we serve as a mirror to people. So if we're kind of leveling up, if we're stepping out, if we're taking a risk, that then reflects onto other people that they're not, and it makes them feel a way. And so for a lot of people, their knee-jerk reaction is like, I see you stepping out and trying something new, and it makes me uncomfortable because I know I should too, but I'm too scared. So I want to pull you back to where I'm at. But again, like that can't be our problem.
I always say like we're not responsible for soothing other people's triggers. And I think like that's what's happening. Like when especially women are successful in like doing things and executing, people love to like hate on it, pick it apart. And I do think it's because there is this level of insecurity that pops up when someone is doing the things that you wish you could do, whether it's like exactly what they're doing or you just see them executing and following through on their purpose and you're not doing the same in your life.
Yeah, it's the tall poppy syndrome.
Ooh, wait, explain it.
Have
I've
you
never
heard of that?
this.
It's a common expression. I think in Australia is where it came from. But this idea that poppies tend to grow to be generally the same height. And if there's a poppy that gets a little bit too tall, they often cut it so that it can be the same height as all of these other poppies, because this idea that like growing above the pack is like not seen as a good thing. So if people see a poppy getting a little too tall, their first instinct is to cut it. And so I think people just need to not be afraid to be the tall poppy, because I actually think the more of us that are like glowing, growing in our gifts, it actually gives everybody else permission to grow as well if we would look at it that way.
Yeah. I think that's why it's so important to like surround yourself with people who are like building and doing things. Because I've noticed even in my own life, I'm kind of in this weird transitional period right now where I like am having to like really put myself out there to like make friends. And like that's something that does not come easy to me. Like, I'm very good at being open and authentic, but it's really hard for me in my relationships to be like super vulnerable. And so meeting friends and like developing relationships and trusting people is hard and like uncomfortable. And I think on the surface, the emotion is like, ew, I don't like making new friends. But I think the deeper root is what I just said. And so I've been having to put myself out there because I noticed that like the people I was surrounding myself with were just like, and it's no hate to them, but they just weren't building the way I was. And I think you need to like see greatness to be able to continue to do it. Though you can be a trailblazer, I think they two things can exist at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you think about like sports, right? I think a lot of us probably played sports growing up. I used to run track. The only way that you run faster is to train with people who are faster than you, who cause you to like step your shit up. If you're the fastest person on a really slow team, that's like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You want to be the fastest person among people that are fast. That's what actually means something. So yeah, it is a little bit uncomfortable, but if it causes you to step your game up, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I love hanging around people who are smarter than me.
Yeah.
And like my ego's dead enough to just like really take and learn. And I think even on this last pod tour in February, I had so many guests on that were just so articulate, and they were pulling references and things from books and literature. It made me inspired to learn more. I was like, oh, I'm rusty a little bit. I need to like pick up some books. I really want to learn. I really want to grow. I want to speak and be able to reference like this. Because to your point, like after a certain amount of episodes, it's like you kind of get repetitive on like some of your things and your philosophies. And so I'm like, I want to like be sharp like that. And I think long story short, it just inspired me to like really put myself out there to like meet people, surround myself with people who are smarter, who are doing the work, who are growing, because ultimately I think it will make me more successful.
Exactly. It does. It totally does.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your third thing.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. So we covered the first two. The third one was just the revenue tax, especially around if you have a business, you try something new, like you might see a little bit of a dip in the numbers.
Yeah, people don't talk about this. Please keep talking.
No, I mean, and if you're recalibrating, if you're stepping out, if you're talking about something different, if you rebrand, you repackage, you launch something new, there is probably a little bit of a dip while you're figuring out what's going on. So something that I experience as I'm continuing to step away from being a wellness influencer and having a wellness show is like, okay, if I'm not partnering with wellness brands anymore, and that's what I'm known for in the space, then yeah, I'm taking a little bit of a dip if I'm turning down these deals to do these very wellnessy things. And I know that's not what I want to be known for. Eventually it will come back, but just know in the beginning, things might veer off a little bit and you got to be comfortable with
Totally.
that.
I feel like I can look back at like my career and timeline and see that happen a couple times. Like,
Yep.
I mean, even starting the podcast, like I moved from being a completely full-time fashion influencer to integrating more mental health content. And I was always talking about mental health on my story, but I was not talking about it like in post. Like it's really hard to like put like a depressive episode update in a Blazer post. So like that was what led me to like start the podcast really, because that was like my ultimate heart, mission. But
Yeah.
I saw it like I like saw my engagement levels going like weird and up and down because I was attracting like this new community, the fashion community that was there just for fashion was probably like, I don't want to hear about this girl's mental health stuff. So partnership suffered. And then I see it again when I don't think I told you this before. Like I have a social media agency in San Diego. And I saw it then too when like I got a studio because we needed a studio for the podcast and also to like have clients and stuff. I was putting like so much investment in, lost a ton of money, because it takes money to make more money.
Right.
And you have to sit in the uncomfortable of like, do I trust myself to execute? Was this the right move? And like that self-doubt I think is normal, but you have to be able to be resilient through it.
For sure. And I think something that you just said is really important that I want to make sure people understand, that piece about self-trust. When you're taking these risks, or you're doing these things, or you're making these changes, it's not because you know it's magically going to work out. It's because you trust yourself enough to know you're gonna make it work either way.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have all the answers today, do you trust yourself enough to know that even when you get knocked down, you're gonna find a way to get back up? And that self-trust is what carries you through. Because if you're waiting for everything to be perfect to make a change, it's never going to.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if you're waiting for it to be perfect, you're just procrastinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think you always had self-trust?
No.
Or do you think it's something you developed?
Definitely something I developed, and I'm still developing.
I think that's the misconception with healing and stuff too, is that like you just like, again, like we went and we were like, yes, we did the work, like onward, and we were feeling good. And it's like, you have to go back, you have to do tune-ups. With life, new things happen and new things are going to be revealed and we're always going to be challenged.
Exactly.
What would you say to someone who's maybe listening and is like, okay, guys, that sounds great. I know I need to trust myself. I need to execute, but they can't. They're stuck. They feel like they can't trust themselves to do that.
I think learning how to embrace change, and I think that doesn't have to be as big and scary as we make it out to be. It doesn't mean you have to go quit your job and go
Yeah.
rebrand a thing, but can you do something that's just a little bit different? Can you, like, if you take a daily walk on like a slightly different route? If you usually in meetings are really quiet, keep your ideas to yourself, can you just like raise your hand and share one little thing? What little things can you do just a little bit differently to step outside of your comfort zone and trust yourself enough to take just a little bit of a risk? Doing that helps you really build that muscle and you start trusting yourself more and more.
Yeah, because you see things work out and you are building evidence that like, oh, my ideas or, the way I execute is successful, and also builds tolerance for failure.
Exactly.
Or quote unquote failure,
Yeah.
I'll say,
It's
because I
tolerance
think
for
like,
discomfort.
yeah, tolerance for discomfort. Because if you say something in a meeting and like it's not received well, like you're building that muscle of like rejection and having to pivot and having to like deal with the uncomfortable. And you have to do that in entrepreneurship a ton.
All the time. All the time.
What was the last piece in this tax? Wait, is it a tax? What did you call it?
I called it the pivot tax.
Love it. Last piece in the pivot tax.
Last piece of the pivot tax, time. The time tax. That things just take time
This is so
to
important.
level out. And that kind of summarizes all four, because for all of those things, whether it's the grief of self, waiting for people to come around, the money dipping and getting funny, it takes time for all of those things to eventually level out.
Yeah.
So it's okay if you don't get the results that you're looking for right away.
Yeah, well, and I think, again, back to the point I made about like people thinking you just like become a content creator and like quit your job. Like it takes time to be successful. It takes time to build a business. Most of the most successful people in the world, like I was listening to Diary of a CEO, the Mr. Wonderful guy on there, like he has had like 6 failed companies or something like that. I think like people do not talk about enough like how long it actually takes to build a successful podcast, make money off content creation, build a business, be successful, be profitable, be able to go out to dinner and have a nice martini. Like that's not something that happens in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year usually. That's
No,
years
it is.
compounded.
I thought about it. The Grammys. I mean, we're award season just finished, and a few months ago, when Olivia Dean won the Grammy for Best New Artist, and she said it took me 10 years to get here. It took her 10 years to become the best new artist. Which is like,
Yes.
really, she's not new at all. She's maybe new to this breakthrough moment, but it took her 10 years to get there.
Well, and it's like when people say like, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky."
Yeah.
Or like even to her probably like, "Oh my gosh, she's so new." Like you just became famous and now you're winning a Grammy, and she's like, I'm new to you because after 10 years you finally know who I am." Or like for me when someone's like you're so lucky, it's like, "Yeah, I had privilege, but I'm not lucky. Like I've worked hard every single day to get to this point and you just haven't seen anything up until this point because you're now discovering me."
Right. That's like the premise of She's So Lucky was I'm obsessed with successful women, which probably started at a very young age. But I often
Love.
found that when people would talk about women who have achieved these amazing things, they would often refer to them as lucky, of like, oh, she's so lucky she got XYZ.
Mm,
But then if you were to actually talk to that woman about what was behind that lucky moment, it was usually like a fuck ton of work. Yes, there was often some form of alignment, but how did she get to that point where the alignment matched up? Probably from a lot of work, intentional action, building relationships, nurturing relationships to get to that point. And so it was like this idea of turning luck on its head to say, instead of being offended when people call us lucky, let's talk about all of the things we did to create that luck. You're like, you know what?
yeah.
I am lucky. And here are the 10 different things I did to line me up for that lucky moment. Let me
Yeah.
list them out for you
Yeah,
so
I
that you can
created
see.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I love that take because I do think that sometimes people let their ego get in the way or they're like triggered. So they respond to people like that with like offense and like very defensively instead of like, and I don't think it's our responsibility to teach everyone and fix everyone, but I do think there's a moment for us to teach people, which I think is what you're doing beautifully on your podcast about like the ups and downs and what it takes to get to where they are because not a lot of these founders, business owners, investors have been able to have a platform to like kind of share the nitty gritty because why would you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's not natural.
And what I've realized is like the gap between where we as everyday people are and these really successful people that we look up to. And I have sat down with so many successful women, whether it is like the founders of your favorite brands, A-list actresses, your favorite creators, your favorite authors. The gap between where we are and where they are after sitting, and I've sat down and talked to them all, is so much smaller than we think. Like they are also people who they put their leggings on one leg at a time, just like us. And when you actually sit and talk to them and hear their stories, you realize that the gap is so much smaller. And I think that that's empowering because it helps us like keep going and figure out, okay, how do I bridge that gap for myself? She's not
Yeah.
that far ahead of me. She's just maybe got a few things figured out. And how can I learn from her and soak in that knowledge so that I can get there too?
Well, and I think a lot of it too, I mean, especially in this day and age, like, is not about being able to develop a skill or like learning and education. It's about like this stuff we're talking about, like the self trust, the like belief in yourself that you're capable of doing what these other people are doing. Would you say that like that from the 400 interviews ish that you've done now is like the gap?
I think that's definitely a part of it. There's also like very real challenges that people
Yeah.
go through. I mean, even if we look at like where we're at in 2026, shit's tough. Everything is on fire. People are hurting. And so those things are very, very real. And I also have sat down with so many people who had such similar stories and origins, even thinking about my own story of what I thought was possible for me at 22, that now at 36, I'm like, oh, I can do that
Yeah.
just from having the exposure to it and realizing that I think success, it does take more than believing in yourself, but believing in yourself gets you at least halfway there.
Yeah.
And then from there, you then have the connections, the audacity, and the support to help take you the rest of the way.
Totally. I would argue that, like, too, at least in my experience, like, a lot of people who are still kind of stuck at this place where they're below the gap and then the people are above is like they kind of have already put in the work.
Yeah.
And they're most of the time, it's this like procrastination kind of piece, like waiting for things to be perfect, waiting for it to make the most sense. And again, like, we have to be realistic. Like, you got to pay bills, you got to like do the things. But I would argue there are so many people who are working multiple jobs at the same time. I mean, me and you both did that, but there's a lot of people that were like way worse off than me who are working like 3 multiple jobs, trying to pay off college loans while also launching a business and still doing it. And I do think there is an audacity piece. I hate when people call it delusion, but like you have to step into this role of like, I'm going to do everything I can and believe that like the effort I'm putting in is going to pay off.
Yeah, well, it's almost like you have to take that energy and you have to direct it towards something. If you're only doing it to either be at homeostasis or to get away from something, that's only going to get you so far. But if you're able to take that energy, that whatever it is that you're doing, and put it towards something that you can actually see
Yeah.
and tangibly move towards, that's so much more powerful.
Yeah. It takes a level of self-trust. And I also think it takes a willingness to be seen, which I
Yes.
don't think a lot of people talk about. I know you opened up on your podcast about like kind of discovering that you have a little bit or still had remnants of feeling like scared to be seen and successful. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because I think it applies to kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the fear of being seen is also related to a fear of criticism, you know? When you're seen, it's like people can see the good, but they can also see the bad. And I also think we're kind of in a space where people want to see the bad and they
Yeah.
want to point out the bad, and it's like really fun to kind of hate on visible people and like be mean.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but people think that if you have any sort of like, if you're a public figure, you put yourself out there in any way, that means you're just signing up for it to be a free for all.
Yeah.
I disagree. I don't think that that should be like normalized behavior, but it is. And I think for a long time, that was definitely, some of my fear is like, nobody just wants people to be mean to them all the time. Nobody
Totally.
wants to hear people just talking shit about you like that. Even if you're a confident person, that still doesn't feel good. You're still a human at the end of the day.
Well, and I think it's interesting because in my own journey too, like I've realized like, I mean, the podcast is called How I See It. It started because I felt unseen
Yeah.
growing up and I just wanted to make other people feel seen. But I would argue that like the thing we want most is usually the thing we protect. Not even in a social media context and podcast context, but like I feel like I am like hesitant to be seen, but then desire it the most. And it's this weird oxymoron where we kind of have to, and I say it all the time, like get uncomfortable for the sake of real comfortability. And I've had to like force myself to like choose to be seen in situations. Do you feel like you kind of see that pattern in your own life too, where you're struggling to open up to be seen or allow yourself to be seen in some of these ways?
I think everybody wants to be seen in one way or another, but where it's challenging is like we want to control how we're seen and we want to control how people feel about us after they see us. And we can't. And so that's what makes being seen so uncomfortable. Like everybody
Yeah.
wants to be seen for their good qualities, for their good intentions, on their good hair days, for
Yeah.
everything. Nobody wants to be seen for like the worst version of themselves, but we can't control how other people perceive us.
Yeah.
So in order to be seen, you're opening yourself up to other people's interpretations. And I think that's what's so uncomfortable is like we're not able to control that perception. But I also do think that there's something really important around boundaries that I've learned as well, because I think that I am somebody who can absolutely be vulnerable when it matters to me, like
Yeah.
in my personal relationships, in real life, when I'm really building connection with somebody. I don't necessarily think that I owe the internet that. And I've had some really vulnerable moments on the internet and people appreciate it. They feel so seen and it goes viral and that's great. But afterwards, I actually feel like shit. It actually doesn't help solve my problem
Totally.
at all. Now I just feel like now people are picking me apart even more and I have this vulnerability hangover and it doesn't do the same thing for me that like a conversation with a loved one in person
Yeah.
really does. And I realized, oh, actually, I don't like that because it actually does nothing for me and I don't owe people that just because they want it. And so I think we also can define vulnerability for ourselves, even though we can't control what other people think of us. I think that we can have boundaries around what we give to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's really important too because like what you said about like choosing your vulnerability, like vulnerability doesn't have to look like crying on the internet. Like
No.
vulnerability like looks different for everyone. And I think it's about like being vulnerable with ourselves too, about like what are those boundaries. I think sometimes people don't even know like what their boundaries are. And I think to your point, it takes risk. Like you've put yourself out there in some ways and you're like, that doesn't feel good. And then you put yourself out again and you're like, okay, I for sure doesn't feel good, you know? So I think it's about like learning and ebbing and flowing with it. But I do think it's all associated with being like authentically aligned. And I think at the end of the day, like when we're so scared to be seen or we're so scared to fail, or we're so scared to like do something wrong, not only do we hold ourselves back, but we start like kind of performing in a way that isn't aligned with who we are. Like we said earlier, like putting ourselves in boxes. So like when someone does hate on us or when someone says something negative, you're actually like more affected by it because you're like, that wasn't even like me, or like that wasn't even fully, like that didn't feel fully me. So now I feel even shittier about it. And maybe for you that moment was like, it's not me to be that vulnerable on the internet, and I'm doing it to try and like make people feel good, but this doesn't make me feel good, so I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I think maybe another version of that is like people will play this character as a defense mechanism so that if they do get the negative pushback, they almost wear it as armor. It's like, well, that wasn't actually me.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting. Yeah,
I think it can go both ways.
totally. Okay, you mentioned on the pod, and I've heard it a couple times. And I don't know if this has to do with like your work on like being seen or whatever, on like mirror work.
Oh, yeah.
I need you to break it down. Like, what is mirror work? And like, how did you find it? Why did you start integrating it? And what is it?
Yeah. And I've actually been off of my mirror work game lately. So this is good. It's going to like hold me accountable to get back into it.
I'm glad you said that though, because I feel like everyone who shares like their mental health routines or whatever acts like it's the thing they do like every single day.
Yeah.
And I would argue like it's more realistic that people are doing these things like 80%.
Right.
70%
Like there
of the
was a
time.
time probably about 6 months ago where I was like really on all of the things, doing all of the practices, like long self-care checklist every day. And now I'm in a space of it being a little bit more minimal. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll do a guided meditation. I'll write a couple lines in my journal and then I'll like keep it pushing. And then there's other seasons of life where it's like I'm doing mirror work, I'm fully scripting, I'm EFT tapping, all of the things. So I do think the podcast has caught me in some of those moments because like this morning looked a little different. But
that's real. You do what you need when you need it.
Exactly. But mirror work is a practice. How did I find out about mirror work? I don't know. I mean, I've had so many different coaches over the years, and I feel like I've been a student in so many ways that I probably picked it up there. But mirror work is basically just a practice of where you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you are either reciting affirmations or you're just like saying kind words to yourself, but you're like making eye contact with yourself in the mirror. And
So
it's
uncomfortable.
hard. It is so uncomfortable, especially at first. But eventually you get to the point where like you feel better about it. A way that I've also done it that feels less awkward is like reciting affirmations while I'm doing my makeup because that can kind of distract you a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier to do it that way as opposed to just like sitting and staring. I've done it both ways. But I mean, it's basically extending some of the kindness and grace that you have for other people back to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, affirmations are a huge part of my mental health journey. Like, but I'm more of the type where like I'm on my walk, I'll hear like you suck and I'm like, no, you don't, or like you're not capable. I'm like, yes, I am. And I'm big on the affirmations and the rewiring the brain, the neuroscience behind it. And I think it completely changed the game for my anxiety and depression. But something about the mirror work though, I have never tried it. And that seems like something about having to look at yourself in the mirror. I think I metaphorically talk about it all the time and how it like takes bravery to like really look at yourself, but never in this context, which is really interesting. What do you think it's done for you and your self-image and the way you see yourself? Because I can imagine like it's tied to self-image a bit because it's not just affirmations around, you know, rewiring as you're walking or whatever. So there's like another piece to this exercise.
Yeah, I mean, you're making direct eye contact with yourself, which can be uncomfortable, but then it's like it gets a lot easier the more that you do it because then you're like, well, why am I so uncomfortable looking at myself? It's me. Like, why am I so uncomfortable being nice to myself? Why is that seen as like such a weird thing? So it does make you reframe how you think of yourself in a positive way. I also think sometimes as women, we can feel so judged for liking ourselves. God forbid a woman likes herself. God forbid I'm not picking myself apart every day and picking out every flaw because that's so accepted. That's what's expected of us. And so when you're not walking around that way in full self-deprecation, then everybody calls you everything but a child of God. And I think that, again, if more of us would like extend a little bit of kindness to ourselves and it was more normalized to be kind to ourselves, we wouldn't feel such a way when we meet a confident woman.
Totally.
It's all about how you also respond to other people. So one of my favorite podcast guests, I've actually had her on the show twice, is a woman named Trisha Lee, who she's like a badass real estate entrepreneur. She's also on the Netflix show Owning Manhattan, if people are familiar with that. We've done 2 episodes together, 2 of like the most popular episodes of my show because she's so cool. In our very first episode together, she said, how you behave when a confident woman walks in the room says a lot about who you are and how you feel about yourself.
Love.
And when she said that, and this was probably like almost 2 years ago, we did that first interview. I was like, oh, that was like such a bar. And that was one of my biggest takeaways is like that gut reaction you have when you see a confident woman says a lot about you. What do you want it to say? And if it makes you feel a way, if it makes you feel like a who does she think she is, and if someone else feeling good about themselves makes you feel like you got to feel bad about yourself, then that's probably an invitation to look in the mirror, make some eye contact, and start saying some nice things about yourself. Because if ideally, when you see somebody else who is like owning her shit and killing it, that should give you kind of a sense of ease.
Yeah,
Of
or just like, look at her.
yeah,
Like,
or like,
yes.
amazing. Now I have proof of what's possible. So if it makes you feel a way that someone else is doing well, then that's probably an invitation to look in the mirror.
Oh, that's so good. I need to bring her on. That's amazing.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so cool. Okay, well, you mentioned a couple other mental health practices, EFT tapping,
Yeah.
and what else in your routine?
Yeah,
that, like,
I
you
love
utilize?
EFT. That was something I was introduced to by a life coach that I worked with a number of years ago. And that is where you're like tapping on different points of your body to kind
Yeah.
of reprogram your thoughts. It's very helpful. And also, when I was in EMDR therapy, we did a version of that. We did a version of like the tapping to kind of reprocess memories. What else? I mean, it was meditation, EFT tapping, mirror work, best case scenario journaling, which is like scripting out how you want the day to go in best
Love.
case scenarios. I think those were like the main things. And then like exercise were the main. When my routine is like 10 out of 10, I'm doing like all of those things every day. Right now, I'm at like, I meditate, journal,
Love.
exercise.
No, I mean, I think it's realistic. I think, again, like we said, it's just you do what you need when you need it,
Yeah.
and you have your tools in your toolbox, and you know when you need to sharpen them and when you're fine. You know, it doesn't need to be overwhelming. Sometimes I think we're over optimizing. Sometimes it just, you need to lean into like what feels good.
Yeah. And I think people also got to figure that out for themselves. Like, I've shared so much about this or even about my journaling. And when I'm journaling, it's not anything crazy. I'm just getting things from my brain out onto paper.
Yeah.
And I've shared journaling content, and people want me to hold their hands and tell them exactly what to write. And I'm like, babes, it's your life. It's your brain. It's your day. How do you want it to go? There's no wrong way to do it. Like, just write some things down. Like, it's not that deep. And so when we
Yeah.
take this idea of like, am I doing it right? Perfection out of it, the practices are able to meet you where you are, but other people can't really do that for you or tell you how it should be. You have to feel it.
Well, I think this goes back to our procrastination thing. Like, I
Yeah.
think this is like a way to procrastinate doing the hard things and actually like stepping in and executing. It's like if I ask more questions, or I try to perfect the way I'm supposed to do it, or the way it's going to work out the best, or I like map out like how many scenarios make the most sense to get like the best case scenario I want. Like, you're just procrastinating because you're uncomfortable to take a leap.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Just think about what's on your calendar that day and be like, my meeting goes so well. I give a great presentation. There's no traffic on the way to work. Like, it's not that deep. Just think about a normal day and think about shit going well and write it down in a way that makes sense to you and like let it go.
Yeah. How do you think that investing in your mental health has impacted the success of your business? Like, what are the things you've noticed or like, wow, like I have like really leveled up money-wise, partnership-wise, you know, all the things because I've actually cared to look and make uncomfortable choices in my like personal mental health, spiritual walk, whatever it is.
It's taught me how to believe in myself. And I'm
Love.
also at the point where, and I mean, I'm barely scratching the surface of like having the things that I want, but I truly don't think that anything is off limits to me. Like,
Love.
there's nothing that I want that I like can't have. Maybe I don't have it yet, or maybe I will have a version of it that's a little bit different or better for me. But I truly don't think that there's anything that I can't have. And that was not who I was growing up or
Yeah.
even 10 years ago. But just that expansion of knowing, like, I'll have it. I'll have whatever version of it I'm meant to have, and like nothing's off limits, absolutely changes how you walk around the world.
You've talked to so many successful women. what do you think, if for the women listening today, because we are 90% women, from all the interviews you've had, like, what do you think is the thing that they need to know about stepping forward into the highest version of themselves, whether it's their mental health or their business?
It's taking messy action.
Love.
It's doing the next best step, even if it's not perfect, even if you don't know if you're doing it right, even if you don't know the outcome. Forward motion is still motion. So you just gotta do something. You gotta take some action in some way, and you're gonna mess up. You're gonna stumble, you're gonna fall, you're gonna realize, oh, I went the wrong way. Okay, then you move another way, but you don't know what way to move if you don't move at all.
It's a women thing, I feel. Men probably do. There's probably some men that do it.
Well,
But I
and
feel
then
like,
I think of the other way, they should like pause a little bit more
yeah.
and think a little bit more
Yeah.
about the things that they do and how it impacts people. I think that there probably is a happy middle that a
Yeah.
lot of people can meet in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're so right. But I think we're so consumed with trying to be perfect, and it just like, it doesn't. I've just learned over and over again, like, life never works out the way you like think it should. It
No.
never, even if you have all the steps to putting together a bookshelf, like, something goes wrong always.
Yeah.
And I think I view life that way. I view business that way as well. And messy is normal. I think we view like messy or mistakes or failure as something that's like so charged and not normal. Like, it's normal to be messy. It's normal to make a mistake. It's normal to fail. If that wasn't normal, like, we'd all be like perfect and we wouldn't be human. There would be like no joy or sadness or ups or downs, because it would just be like monotone.
Yeah. And it's like the whole point is to learn from it. Like, yes, it's normal to stumble and make mistakes. Maybe don't make the same mistake over and over again, but like,
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
learning from the mistakes? Are you moving forward from the mistakes? Are you learning from other people's mistakes? That's the real cheat code. You don't have to make every mistake yourself to learn from it. You can peep mistakes that other people are making and avoid those missteps. Like, is your third eye open to see what's happening around you?
Yes. And I think, and I'm pretty sure this has to do with a concept you've talked about in your podcast. Before I let you go, I want you to talk about it. What is the concept you talk about in your podcast that's like about eating your vegetables, like your mental vegetables?
Oh, yeah.
Can you please break that down? Because I actually think it's a really tangible way that people can understand, like, building up tolerance.
Yeah, for sure. It's how I feel about a lot of like the wellness practices of the things that like it's not always fun to wake up early and journal. It's not always fun to get up and go to the gym each day, but I think of it as the mental equivalent of eating my vegetables. It's not always fun to like eat some vegetables, but you do it because you know it's good for you.
Yeah.
You spend a few minutes chewing, you get it down, but you get the benefits, right? It's the same thing with doing things that you just don't necessarily want to do. And something that I'm really grateful for is that in adulthood, I just kind of realized that early on, where it was like if I was going to wake up, if I was going to work out, it made my day so much better, even if I didn't feel like it. And so I
Yeah.
started thinking of it as mentally eating my vegetables, where even if it doesn't feel good in the moment, if it's ultimately good for me and I'll feel good after, that I'm just going to do it.
Well, and I think it applies to this concept too, because if you know your desire and you know what you want for your life,
Yeah.
and you know that it takes all of this uncomfortable to get there, like, you just kind of have to force yourself to do it. And I think if you just force yourself to eat your vegetables
Yeah.
and you like make yourself uncomfortable, you view the risks and the emotional and mental and even physical, because I think people feel like anxiety and all of that in their body too when it comes to this stuff. If you can try your best to flex I can hold this and this can happen while also moving forward, because I have to do what I have to do to get to where I want to go, I do think you build up that tolerance. And I'm sure the best way to do it is to start with these small disciplines like wellness, mental health, eating, working out. But you
Yeah.
can take that same concept and apply it to building up a tolerance around your self-doubt and your imposter syndrome and your anxiety around messing up.
For sure. I mean, you're practicing moving through discomfort. The more resilient you are towards discomfort, the more successful you will be.
Yeah.
So if you could find these moments to help you practice that discomfort, if it's exercise, I think is the best way to do it, because you are physically uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard. You're out of breath, you're sweating, things are heavy, but then afterwards you feel so good, and then you're stronger, and then you're better off. And the more you do that, then when you experience a moment of discomfort or challenge in the day, it's like, oh, this is nothing, because I've already done this. So I can
Yeah.
just handle it, versus not like cowering and being broken by any moment of inconvenience.
Yeah, I always say like the most successful people aren't the smartest. They're
No.
just the people that can like are the most resilient, who can like push through the imposter syndrome, the anxiety, the ups and downs of failure. Like, sure, there's a lot of other factors, but I do think that, it's not the smartest person in the room, because I do think there's a lot of people that are kind of sitting on this like I don't want to say like high horse of this, like, I could do that better. You know, I feel like I've heard people in my life be like, oh, well, she's doing that. And like, I could do it so much better. It's like, well, then why are you not doing it?
Right.
Like, she's doing it.
Right.
Like, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter if you could do it better. You're not doing it.
Right.
Like, she's successful because she's doing it.
Exactly.
And so I do think people get caught up on that like comparison game too. But at the end of the day, I do think it takes resilience, a lot of mental resilience to be able to move through all of it. Mental health, business, ups and downs of the human experience.
Yeah.
It's mental resilience.
Being able to bounce back.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having
it so
me.
much. It's such a pleasure to hear you in person. And I know like the community is just going to like love the episode of not only hearing your story, but like the motivational pieces around like what you've learned and what you've done through your own story and talking to other people. I ask everybody that comes on the podcast at the very end, looking back at like everything you've been through, the different careers, the ups and downs of your mental health, what you're doing now on the podcast, looking back at it all, how do you see it?
Ooh, how do I see it? The price of admission.
Ooh,
I see it all as the price of admission for the life that I know I'm meant to have.
Oh, that's so good.
Thank
I love
you.
it. I love it. Thank you so much. Please share where people can follow you and also find the podcast and follow the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So people can listen to She's So Lucky every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram at Les Alfred, and then I'm on TikTok at The Lucky Les.
Love. Thank you so much. And you can listen to How I See It on Tuesdays and then Les right after. You can download us on the same day because we're both on Tuesdays.
Perfect. Tuesday is like the podcast day.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Thank you so, so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode and I hope you leave here feeling motivated and inspired. Do not forget to rate and review the pod on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to follow How I See It Pod so you can keep up with podcast updates and see who's coming on next. And if you're not already, come join the fam and follow at How Han Sees It. Thank you guys.